Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from the world. My name is Stephen Minor. I'm joining you from Nairobi, Kenya, some minutes to midday here in Nairobi. And we're super excited to be taking you through today's session here at the GDHF. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we can pick it up from there. Great. Fantastic. So maybe just by a quick show of hands, just to confirm you can see my screen. Just by a quick show of hands, just to confirm you can see my screen. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we are going, as the topic had indicated, we're going to be running you through an interactive workshop titled Using A/B Testing to Identify Winning Digital Health Campaign Strategies. This is something that we're super excited about here at PSI, something that we've been running now for a little over 2 years now. And we felt we would love to share with the rest of us in the industry to tell you to share what we have learned. Before I go on, just for introductions, my name is Stephen Minor, as I mentioned before. I'm the program manager here at Population Services International. My main role being around social media, where I help work with different countries globally to help them execute and run effective digital marketing campaigns. I'm joined by my colleague Penny. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself.
Thank you, Steve. My name is Penny Pandey. Happy to be here. I am the Social Media Optimization Manager at Population Services International, PSI. I'm looking forward to an interactive and learning session today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Speaking of interactive, we wanted to engage you. We are surrounded by choices everywhere today in today's world. There are choices from right up when you wake up. One of the first choices many of us face or many of us have experienced is, picking up your coffee or your tea for that morning drink. And I'm just curious to find out who in our audience today, what you prefer. Is it coffee or tea? And you can go ahead there and share in the chat space there. As you introduce yourself, it'll be great to know who is in the room with us, where you're joining us from, and the organization you represent as well. So please feel free to let us know. Thank you, Dr. Rao. I see you. Looks like we have many coffee takers in the house. Lucy, oh wow, Lucy says both. Lucy, that was not an option, but thank you for sharing, Lucy. Welcome to the session. Fantastic. So yes, so my personal one will be coffee, and that's what I prefer in the morning. Like many of you, I can see that's also a choice. Another choice that, with the holidays coming up, many of you maybe have already made this choice, whether to have a bush or a beach holiday. I prefer the sun, and I'll any day go with the beach for my holiday. But choices are everywhere. And it's the same thing when it comes to digital marketing and running your campaigns. We are bombarded by so many choices, from what messages to choose, what creatives to choose, which audience to target. And so with today's session, we are hoping that through this workshop, or rather through this interaction, we'll be able to help you identify how you look at some of the strategies and things and creatives that can help you with these digital health strategies. But why do we need to test? You could ask, why do we need to test? We need to test because of a couple of things. So before we go even to why, let's talk about a little about A/B testing. So A/B testing, at least as Facebook is concerned, lets you change variables such as your ad creative and audiences or placements to help you determine the strategy that works best for you for future campaigns. So for example, you might hypothesize and say a COVID-19 creative showing maybe a healthcare worker will outperform one showing a civilian. We could also, for example, say targeting younger audiences could help our campaigns perform way better than if we're targeting older audiences, and so on and so forth. But what an A/B test does is that it helps you quickly compare both strategies and see which one works better for you. And then after you choose the strategy you want to test, Facebook will divide your budget and randomly distribute the exposure between these two versions of your creative. And the winner is determined by what they call a cost per result basis. So, and we'll be looking at that hands-on. We actually do have a session where I'll walk you through practically how to test those out. So ideally, that's what Facebook testing is about. But some of the benefits that come with testing as a whole is, number one, it helps improve user engagement. So you're able to test out the creative strategy or the variable that best drives user engagement. The second thing we have seen from our learnings is that it helps with conversion rates. So when you've tested the creative that will work best, you're able to then deploy that on your main campaign. And we have actually seen higher engagement and conversion rates for the campaigns we have conducted. The other thing is around content. So it helps improve your content greatly. We have seen this happening a lot in terms of how different campaigns and how different countries are running their campaigns, that we have seen an improved content strategy and just how countries and teams are building their content. The other thing is around lowering the risk. Yeah? So this is, say you have a digital campaign and you want to use maybe $5,000, $10,000. So instead of deploying it all at once, we have seen using some of that budget to run A/B tests before you deploy your entire budget and before you commit your entire budget onto campaign. So we have seen that working before for different teams. The other two things are quickly. So we've seen one of the benefits that's fairly quick to get your results. So here we're talking about maybe 4 days or less, and it's fairly inexpensive. So we've seen this in, for example, here's a screenshot, an actual screenshot for a campaign we ran in one of our countries, where you can see the campaign took only 4 days, 3 days actually, from 3rd of November to the 6th of November. And the total spend was a little over $150. So you can see here some of the benefits in terms of it being fairly inexpensive and also using a short amount of time. And now with these learnings, you can then deploy the longer campaigns and even commit more budget on to your campaigns. And A/B testing has various applications. So you can test it, you can use it in obviously social media advertising, which is what we'll be doing today. You can also use it in email. So, you could use, for example, to test out different topics and say, different subject lines. If I title my email a certain subject versus a certain subject, which one gets a higher open rate or response rate? Web pages is also something that has been used a lot for A/B testing, where we look at page layouts. If you want, for example, you have a website for a health intervention and you're still designing it and you can't quite figure out which layout works better, then this is something you could deploy for testing. Blog titles is also one that we've seen that can be used, A/B testing can be used, and call to action buttons. So if you're trying to figure out which call to action button would perform best in a campaign or in a certain strategy, then A/B testing is something that you could use for your to figure that out. But the process here, we've divided it into 4 sort of main components. There could be more, but for these purposes, we've sort of condensed them to these 4. So the first one being, the first stage is identifying the variable you want to test. So it starts from identifying what you want to test, and then building hypothesis around it. And you could actually flip that. You could start with building the hypothesis, then identifying the variable you're going to test, then running the A/B test. Then at the end of it, you want to measure and evaluate the results that you have seen. So let's jump right in. Let's look at the next step, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Penny to walk us through the next stage. Penny, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so we've and welcome to those guys joining along the way. So we are going to this step of choosing the variable to test. So I'm going to share. Let me just next slide, please. Okay. So when it comes to factors to consider when choosing a variable, the first one is definitely the campaign objective. So, before you start the campaign, you do the A/B testing. For example, will your campaign be on engagement, post-engagement? Will your campaign be on website traffic? So those are some of the things that you think about, your campaign objective, because these are the things that, you check these are the things you use to measure the results. So it could be traffic, it could be post-engagement, it could be, as you've seen, the call to action, but where do you want to send your users? So that it depends. And then we also have the creative strategy. So I'm going to go ahead here and say it's the creative strategy and the resources available. So for example, if you're using an agency, you want to choose the right creative strategy before they go ahead and do all the work for the campaign. So for example, if you're using an illustration, you could be using real people. So you could actually ask to just save on resources and time spent, especially if an agency is charging based on the hours they've put into the creative work. So you could actually first allow yourself, your organization to test and see what will work well and resonate with the audience. So, and then you can, for example, if you find that an illustration is working better, then the agency could go ahead now and spend the hours that they're costing or they're charging on, and work on the right creatives. So that's on the creative strategy. So you need to consider that when choosing your variable. And then it's also obviously the target audience. So for example, if it's an SRH, it's an SRH, you could decide to test, for example, and it's an SRH, maybe sexual reproductive health campaign. You could decide maybe if you're testing women only, you could actually consider the target audience, and you could actually even split them. For example, we'll share this later. We've had campaigns where, we test different age groups in one gender. If it's the target audience, you could actually do that based on location, just to see, where it's logical or advisable to spend your budget on. So we've talked about age, we've talked about the location. The other thing you could test with the target audience is the gender. You want to know, you want to, have an idea of how your campaign will work depending on the gender, so that you can actually have your campaign targeting, the gender that is likely to, have where your campaign is likely to have better results and better health behavior change. So those are, some of the things that you think about when you're choosing the variable. So examples of variables tested. So for example, this year we've had a campaign, for example, in Lesotho, where we were able to check to this, and this was a COVID campaign, as you can see in the messaging, and we were testing the creative style. So you can see, like, on one side, we're testing, a hand, and on the other side, we're testing a face, a doctor's face. So here, you want to see what the audience will actually resonate better with. And we'll talk about this later in this presentation. There was a hypothesis behind it. So these are some of the things that you could do. So this was done in Lesotho. On the other hand, in Mali, we tested this one creative, and we tested it against gender, as you can see, men and women. Because you also want to see, as much as you have audience, the audience insights tool, for example, on Facebook, you also want to have real results that are based on, you testing different genders. So for this one in Mali, we tested male and we tested the female, with the same messaging. So remember, everything else has to remain constant. So you can see it's one photo, one message, and one, main theme of the campaign. Yeah, so that's another campaign example that we had. Another one that we had was in India, where we tested the creative type. So on one side, we have an image, and the other, a creative that has an image and of course some text overlay. And then on the other side, we have a text only. And this one you want to test because I'm sure based on experience, you found, areas where, some people based on the bundle available, or for example, if it's a project, let's say a HIV project, that is in the rural area, maybe poor connection or poor or low cost handsets. So you really want to see, which creative will work and which one will pass the message. So you can see everything else is a constant, and we were able to test text only and one that has an image. And then on the other side is South Africa, this was creative style. So here on one side you have a real, hands of a real human being. And then on the other side, you have like an illustration. So we also tested this because, it's the digital world, behaviors change, online behavior change, preferences change based on the target audience. So everything else, again, is a constant. And you can see we just were testing the image, an illustration and a real person. So another example is Côte d'Ivoire. So we have two messages. So one is l'union fait la force, which means stronger together. And then the other one is tout le monde sur le pont, which means all hands on deck. So again, everything else is a constant, and we were able to check which message, which message resonates better. So this is message testing. And we did this, just a little bit of background. We did this in a few countries in French West Africa, and we were able actually to get like a majority of the countries preferring one message. And so for the main campaign, we actually picked one message and worked and used that for the main campaign, because that is what resonated with the audience, and it was like a strong win. Yeah, so that's on message testing. And then on the other hand is Vietnam. IOE, a symptom checker, an online symptom checker. So here we tested the creative style. So you can see on one side we have human beings and the phone in the middle, because the message is checking is an online symptom checker, an app. And then on the other side, we have the phone only. So we wanted to see which one the audience, which one would stop the scroll, or, which one the audience would resonate better with. And then the winner is what we carried on to the main campaign to, to optimize on results. So at this point, I'd like you to go to the chat. Remember, I said this is an interactive session. So just give us like top of your mind, don't overthink it. Examples of variables you can test for your upcoming health campaign. You don't have to give us details, but you could probably in the next 1 minute, go to the chat area and kindly let us know, two variables. It could be message testing, as we've seen, creative testing, creative style. It could be gender, it could be a demographic, another demographic, factor like age. So let's see on the chat area, anything like in your upcoming campaign. It could be a call to action button. Maybe you want to test call now or messages, just something that you'd like to test in your upcoming campaign. Any two variables that you think, wait, that would be good to test. Anyone? Oh, nice. Thank you, Faith. Demographic, rural versus urban teenage girls audience. That's a good one. And, most digital platforms will allow you to actually do that. We have Steve, male versus female. That's gender is usually like a good one. And, you know where to get to spend your ad money or ad budget. And that helps you get a good return on ad spend. Anyone else? Thank you, Dr. Rao. So younger age versus middle age, yeah, so that's a really good one. And the language. Thank you so much. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, Timothy. Smartphone versus feature phone. Thank you so much. So I'd like to hand it over back to Steve for the next part of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. So we are going to build up from there, and So it all starts with building a hypothesis, right? So what we've seen from our campaigns, how we've conducted our campaigns is that we start by building a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is nothing more than a prediction of what what you anticipate prior to running an experiment, right? So it's for those of you who have shared and said, you don't test out the agenda, you don't test out the message. The hypothesis around that could be based on your own program teams. It could be based on those in the field. So we've seen that being a huge factor, relying on some of the people maybe who are interacting with your consumers, and using that to build a hypothesis. And the format for hypothesis, now it could take many formats, but the one that we've used and the one that has worked for us is an if dash then dash because. And let me walk you through. So you could say, for example, if I use creatives showing a doctor, that will resonate more than if I use a creative showing a doctor, then we'll receive high engagement rates because doctors are perceived to have to be more trusted messengers of the message. So something along those lines. But let me walk you through the steps. So number one is identifying the problem that you're dealing with. Yeah. So in our case, it could be the problem is we want to drive higher traffic, say, to a Ministry of Health website where people can book a COVID vaccine or can see some locations where the vaccine is being disseminated and so on and so forth. Yeah. So that could be the problem that you're trying to deal with. And then the next step is singling out a variable. Now you can do this in phases and we'll show you later, but you can do it, you could start from, say, my variable will be a message, right? Is it better, will people resonate more if they are told, protect the ones you love, get a vaccine, or get vaccinated so that you can interact more with your friends and family, and so on and so forth. So for example, it could be also an image, as I was saying earlier, comparing a healthcare worker versus a civilian, which one would drive high engagement and higher overall traffic to the website. And then setting your statement with the hypothesis. Now, as I said, the formats could vary, but ideally you want to say, for example, images showing a doctor will outperform those showing a civilian because doctors will portray more trust. Yeah, so that's the format. So it's a three-step process that we have found working very well for PSI and our different teams globally, and I can see a few of them have joined in. Thank you very much. So this sort of three-part process has worked well for us to identify the need. And let's build one, yeah? So again, the format is if, then, because. Now, I'm going to start us off as you're thinking of a hypothesis that you could build. I'm going to challenge you to put your thinking caps on and think of a hypothesis based on an upcoming health campaign that is currently running or something that you anticipate to run early next year. So for me, as I mentioned earlier, our if then because statement could read something like this. If we use a doctor creative, then our engagement rate will be higher. Or we could say then our click-through rate will be higher. Then you could say then our engagement will be higher. Whatever you sort of want to choose to put in here, because doctors are considered to be more trusted messengers. Now, is this a fact? Probably not. And that's why it's called a hypothesis. Could we be wrong? Yes, we could. And again, that's because that's why it's called a hypothesis. But is it is the hypothesis founded on some, I don't call it data, on some thinking? Yes, it is. We have seen these from WHO. We have seen messages around that. So ideally here is that you want to mix a balance. So you want to have a bit of data and a bit of context to guide your hypothesis. And again, the context here could come from your field teams. It could come from different members in your team, maybe program managers or implementers, or even from a senior level, yeah. And then we're testing out, or it could come up from your creative team. So you've seen this a lot with some of the countries you've worked with, where the creative team, feels a certain type of creative will resonate better, and maybe the program teams feel a certain level of campaigns will resonate better. And that's how we build it, yeah? So I'm gonna give us a few minutes. If there's anyone who is willing, again, it doesn't have to be, as polished as this, but is anyone willing to give out or to try a hypothesis here on the chart? Let me see if there's anyone who is willing to give it a go. And it's okay if you can't think of something, but I'll challenge you to think of such a format. Let me see, let me go to the chat and let me see if there's anyone who is willing to give it a try. See, give us a few more minutes. I'm sure many of you are still thinking about it. It does take time, and the more, from our learnings, the more you do it, the more you sort of become better at it, and the easier it is for you and your partner team. So think about that. As you're thinking about that, let's move on because of the interest of time, and let's move on to the next level, the next phase, okay? But actually, it's a good place to take a pause and just give a shout out to many of the PSI network teams that I'm seeing joining. I can see Sekela joining us from Lesotho. I can see the South Africa team. The Nigeria team is in with us as well, and the Ethiopia team, and our team from India as well. And the Kenyan colleagues are here as well. Thank you. So let's all take a pause and let's use this breathing exercise. It's something I've done and helps me many times. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at the photo here. So you have 4 corners. So you have a breathing in, a breathing out, and you breathe in again, and you breathe out again. So place yourself at the blue dot there. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. It works better that way. And imagine yourself moving from one corner of the square to the other corner of the square. So take a deep breath. Hold it. So you're the other corner, then breathe out. Then go all the way to the other corner, then breathe in again. So you're the other corner, and then breathe out. Great. Feels better, doesn't it? I don't know about you, but always helps me. The reason we're taking a pause is I wanted us to jump right into the practical setup of how to do this. But before we do that, a few prerequisites if you want to run the A/B test. Now, if we consider the hypothesis we had built earlier of saying, if we use a doctor creative, then our engagement rates will be higher because doctors are considered to be a more trusted messenger, or doctors are considered to be more trusted messengers for COVID-19. So this could be any intervention. For our case here, the assumption or the example we'll be using is a COVID-19 campaign. So some factors here. So you're thinking about the creative. So in this case, rather you're thinking about the variable. So in this case, our variable is a creative. So that's what we are working on. And then consider your budget. Now, I did say that one of the things and the benefits we've seen of using A/B testing is that because they're fairly inexpensive. So we have seen this for many of our teams, even with $50, even with $25, you could run an A/B test that is going to be of great help before you launch into your larger campaign and commit more of your resources in it. And let's take a target audience. I can see our Lesotho colleagues are with us, and let's assume we're going to run this in all of Lesotho and target all genders and all ages. Now, you could you could shift that. I see many of you had given an example of a variable saying younger versus older demographic. You could choose to go with that. You could choose to go with gender for your target audience if that's a variable that you're testing. But the idea here is one variable and all the others are constants in that space. Okay, so let's build. So I'm gonna stop my screen here and reshare, and let me see if you let me know if you can see my screen with a thumbs up. If you can see my screen, any thumbs up, a thumbs up if you can see, or a raised hand. Thank you, Umar. Great. So let's kick off. So we're going to do this from Ads Manager. There are many ways to do to run these A/B testing. You could do it from the experiments tab. We're choosing to do it from the Ads Manager. That's what we've seen working for us. So, for example, say we want to choose and compare which of these two creatives are going to drive higher engagement. So I'm going to choose the engagement as my objective. Okay, there we go. There we go. Great. So that's the Ads Manager. We're going to name our campaign there. So we're going to call it COVID-19 A/B testing creatives. And then, so this is the part you have to note. You have to switch on the A/B testing button at the campaign level. If you're familiar with Ads Manager, you have 3 levels. You have the campaign level, you have the ad set level, and the ad level. So we want to switch on the A/B testing at the ad level, at the campaign level, which is the highest level that we have. So make sure ensure you select the A/B testing and then move on to next. Okay, great. So we're looking out for engagement. So this is what we're doing. But before we do that, let's name our ad sets. It's always best practice to name our ad set. And let's say we're starting the one with the Dr. Creative. There you go. So then move on to your ad. So this is the ad that we are looking at, and it's not a video, so it's a photo. So we're looking at post engagement. So ideally, what I'm doing here is I'm telling Facebook, optimize my creative for engagement, and sort of that's what we're going to use to measure as to which is a winning campaign. That's what we're looking for. So choose post engagement. So our budget was $100. Again, this is something else to bear in mind. So ideally, the A/B test is that you'll be splitting the cost 50-50. So if our budget is $100, I'm going to come in here and choose $50 because this is part A of the A/B test that we are running. So just have that in mind and remember to put half of your entire budget when you come to setting the daily budget. So we're going to leave the start date and the end date there because Facebook will give us the end date. And then the gender, remember the target audience, remember here we choose to go to with the entire country of Lesotho, entire age group, and all genders. Now, this is not best practice. I must mention this. Many times we've seen segmented campaigns to be performing better because their needs and create their needs, especially for COVID campaigns. So for COVID campaigns, we largely segmented our campaigns based on gender because concerns around the COVID vaccine especially were different when it came to women versus men. We also saw success when we segmented our campaigns on age basis. So where we'll target maybe older audiences and tell them, get the vaccine to protect your family, your children, and we'll target younger audiences telling them, hey, get the vaccine to get back to your social life. So I'm just going to put that disclaimer here. This is not the best practice in terms of running the campaign, but for this example, we're going to target all ages in the entire country and both genders, okay? And then move on next. So we are at the ad set level. We moved from the ad set level to the ad level. So here, again, best practice is to name your ad. So this is the name we're going to give it. So it's A/B testing for you, the doctor. Choose the page that you run this from. And then here we're going to run it as an ad. So that's also something else we've seen. Ideally, you want to run this as an ad so it doesn't appear on your timeline, because the whole idea, remember, we are testing out to see what performs better before we commit it as a fully fledged campaign, as an ad, or as a post. So I'm going to say create the ad here. And then I'm going to choose my media. So if you've been following here, this is part A of the A/B test, and we're testing out the doctor creative. So I'm going to come in here. I already prepared this prior. So you have our doctor creative in there. So you can see the message there. The doctor is there. And then I'm going to click done. There we go. And of course, a caption. Remember, captions are supposed to be short and precise and to the point. And so our caption here is, so that's the caption we're using, right? So So our campaign is going to appear in this format. COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Let me just change that here. Great. Okay. So we're not going to put a call to action on this. So ideally, we want to run this as is, and then once you've done that, then you'll say publish, as you do with any other creative that you're launching. Okay. So remember, we had selected A/B tests at the campaign level. So this is where you see the difference versus running a normal campaign. So immediately you're done with the A/B test, you sort of get this prompt because you had mentioned, you had indicated prior that this is going to be an A/B test. So when this prompt comes up, it's ideally asking you to finish your A/B test by now identifying the variable, identifying the version B of the A/B test. Remember, what we were doing was version A for the doctor. So I'm going to come here and say continue with the campaign. So ideally, what Facebook will propose is you make a copy of the ad you just created. However, you could pick an existing ad to use. Now, because we don't have an existing ad, we want to make a copy of the ad that we've just placed. I'm just going to say copy this ad as our campaign. And then I'm going to click next. Now, here's where you identify the variable. Remember, or rather, here's where you tell Facebook which variable you're going to run. Remember, prior to this, we had our hypothesis. Our hypothesis was around, who can guess just on the chart there, just to see we're all following. Anyone who can guess? What variable did we say we are testing with this particular campaign? Anyone? Let me see if there's anyone. And just to ensure you're all following on the chart there. Anyone? Let me see. Or let me give you a clue. Was it a creative? Was it an audience? Or was it placement? Anyone who can remember? Yes, Lucy, spot on. It is a creative. Thank you. So we are testing out a creative. Remember, our hypothesis was if we use a doctor creative, then our campaign will receive more engagement because doctors are perceived to be more trusted messengers of a health topic. So it is a creative, right? So I'm going to choose the creative in here. And it's going to ask me which ad do you want to copy. Remember, what we just created was the doctor ad. So I'm going to choose that to test. And then click next, okay? So when you're here, then, Facebook is going to ask us to create, to put in the name of our test. So the name of our test here, we could choose and say, let's call it A/B testing, creative style versus civilian, okay? And this does help when you're coming to look at your tests. Remember, you could run multiple A/B tests. We've had teams, and I can see some of them are joined here, where at a single time you're running 3 or 4 tests. So this naming helps you to identify which test it is. The other one that, and Penny is going to talk about this later, so Facebook is asking you, how do you want to determine the winner of this A/B test? What metric are you using? Now, in this case, we're going to be using the cost per result. That is a post engagement. And what we're telling Facebook is, listen, we have 2 creatives here. We have a doctor creative, we have a civilian creative. Go out and check which has the least cost of engagement, which one is cheaper to run for us, and that's how it's going to measure. Now, there are many other metrics that you could use, and Penny's going to talk about that in a few. But for this case, we're using the cost per engagement, okay? Include the upper funnel metrics. This helps to widen the key metric that you're using. And then the schedule here, the A/B test is going to run for 3 days. So this is the default in a sense when you're picking an A/B test. When you're just telling Facebook in the next 3 days, run the A/B test. But we also have seen great success or some of the best practice you've seen is leaving this open and telling Facebook, if the test concludes early and you find a winner, please, or rather, if you find a winner early, please conclude the test. And that is helpful because it helps you save on your budget, and it helps you even move faster. So we have seen A/B tests concluding even in 2 days when the winner has been established through Facebook, okay? And then we're going to say create the ad set. So it's going to take us back to the ads manager. If you're familiar with ads manager, so it's going to take us back having created a copy of the ad set. And this is what you're seeing here. So this is a copy here. So what we like doing is going back to the ad set there and just renaming it. Just renaming it as the civilian ad set, because now this is ad set number 2. There you go. So this is a civilian one, still the same thing that we're testing, same variables. We're not changing anything on this level. We're not changing anything. We're going to leave it as is. And then come in here and give it the name of the ad that we are running. So this is civilian, yeah? So it's going to assume the same pages. Then this is where we come and remove. So we're going to remove this creative and add the civilian creative. So let me go ahead and add a creative there. We prepared this prior. And so a few things to note. It's the same message, but a different creative. So we're showing a civilian here, but the other one was showing a doctor. Same message, because ideally we want to test out if this was a message campaign that you're trying to test out, as Penny has shown, then it could be the same image with a different message. But just to give you a recap, so this is what we're testing. Same message, COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective. Protect the ones you love. Get yours today at your local clinic. And we're testing it versus this doctor creative. COVID-19 vaccines are safe. So same caption, same image, but same caption, same message on the creative, but a different creative altogether, okay? So I'm going to go back to that. And at this point, I click publish. So when I publish this, what's going to happen is that the ad will go out on $100 budget. Remember, one ad set was $50 and the other one was $50. It's going to run for 4 days, and it's going to be testing out those 2 variables. Okay. Now Facebook does this automatically. So Facebook does this automatically, where it's going to pick the winner for you without you having to change anything, in a sense. Okay. So it gives a few minutes. So I just want to walk you through what we've done. We've created this campaign where it's testing the creatives. In that campaign, there are 2 different ad sets. So one is for a doctor and the other one is a civilian. And in each of them, in each of the ad sets, there are 2 different creatives. One for a civilian and one for a doctor. Remember, everything else was constant. The budget was constant. The target audience was constant. The budget, the messaging was constant. The captions that we used, and in a sense, the only variable here that we have used is the images that we're using. Okay, great. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this walkthrough was effective, and I hope that it's something that you've learned in terms of how to walk through the A/B testing, and that is something that you can deploy to your teams and has tons of benefits in terms of what we can use, and we're going to share that in a few. But I hope this has been helpful. I hope that walkthrough has been something that has enabled you to understand what we're doing. And I'm going to hand it over to Penny to walk us through how then do we measure. So how then do you measure the results and evaluate what is running? Penny, back to you.
All right, thanks, Steve, for that detailed illustration. I'm sure we all have an idea why it's called an A/B test. We saw at A and we saw at B. So then, a test is all about results. So how do you measure and evaluate these results? Next slide, please. Okay, so we are going to use the example of Facebook here because that's actually what we used to illustrate. So, you might be doing, if your campaign objective, let's say, was engagement, naturally you want to test the cost per result in terms of post engagement. So, for example, you might find that Facebook, declares the winner based on, the lower the cost, the better, and the better return on ad spend. So, Facebook will declare within those 4 days that Steve has talked about, it will declare if your goal was engagement, then within that time it will determine the winner. If the chance of winning is greater than 80%, then it determines the winner. And in this first metric, it will be on cost per result in terms of post engagement or any other engagement. It could have been page engagement. It's all up to you and what you want to measure. So it's sometimes it might be CPC, cost per link click. And this happens, for example, if you're directing people to a certain website, and we've seen this in our campaigns, at one time or another. So the lower the cost, again, the better. So cost per link click. And you have to have your the end in mind in terms this time, meaning your campaign objective or your campaign goal. It could also be the cost per 1,000 people reach. This is especially if you wanted to create awareness. So you want to find what is the cheapest, or which creative will give you the cheapest, or the lowest cost, in terms of reaching a large number of people at a lower cost. So you want to find that out so that you can maximize on your advertising, dollars. And then also it could be cost per purchase, but this is more common, for e-commerce, for, a more commercial context, as opposed to, a health area. So as I said, the winner is determined if the chance of winning is greater than 80%, because you want to have a reliable results. So for example, if the 2 creatives that you're seeing on the screen, it would have been Stronger Together versus the other one. So if and in this case, the doctor won in terms of cost. So how do you evaluate results and refine findings? So we do this, we layer it, right? So we do this in 2 phases. So phase 1, you came in, you probably decided, okay, we need to find out, is it a civilian creative that will appeal to the audience more, or is it like a doctor? So you test that, right? And then you find, the results show that the doctor won. Then you move to the second phase, and you refine that further. And you want to find out, okay, fine, it's the doctor, but is it, the female doctor or the male doctor? So you test that and find out, which one is going to, work with the audience more. Remember, why you're doing all this is that you know what your message is, but again, who is delivering the message is also equally important, especially when it comes to matters health. Yeah, so I think that was it in terms of measuring the results. It's just bit on your findings. So I'm going to hand it back over to Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. And just a caveat here, something that we had noticed. The message, the Stronger Together is constant, but the caption there is different. It shouldn't. It should be the same caption across all the creatives. And we had those creatives with us. Let's say, I'm so sorry for that. Misinformation, but again, it should be the same caption in there. But let's look at what we've learned. So as I mentioned earlier, for PSI, we've been doing this a little over 2 years, and we've learned a lot of things, and we've sort of tried to compile them into a few pointers here. There could be more, and I know a couple of team network country members are with us, and they probably even have more learnings, but a couple of them that have come out is, number one, is a clearer hypothesis will help you design the A/B test much better. And we've seen that spending time on the hypothesis building and the hypothesis creation really does have an effect on the overall, on the success of the overall A/B test. So I'll encourage you, spend some time, don't do it alone, invite your creative team, invite maybe those who are on the ground, and you could build several hypotheses. It doesn't have to be one. I did mention earlier that we have had instances where we've ran different hypotheses at the same time too, for the various campaigns that we're running, okay? And the other thing is that we've seen that high engagement as a result of A/B testing. When you finally deploy the campaign, we've seen high engagements in campaigns that had prior done a testing of the messages of the creatives versus those who had not done the testing. So we've seen that engagement levels increasing or improving on those campaigns. The other thing that we've seen is that learning to change one variable at a time, and as Penny mentioned, then layering the learnings on to the next level. So as Penny had mentioned, you could start off by even the message, yeah? So we've done that in campaigns where we have said, let's put the creatives aside. Let's first focus on the message. What message do we believe will perform better? So for a COVID campaign, it could be, get vaccinated today, visit your local clinic, or get vaccinated today, protect the ones you love, or something of the sort. And this could apply, again, our examples are around COVID-19, but we've done this on sexual reproductive health campaigns. We are deploying this in malaria campaigns, HIV and AIDS campaigns, and other sort of campaigns. So think about your campaign and think of the one variable that you could test at a time, and then with that learning, build on to the next phase of the campaigns, yeah. And we've had countries where we have tested, I think, 3 levels or 3 layers. Started off with the message, moved on to the type of creative, moved on to the gender, and so on and so forth. It's really endless as to what you could test. Now, just a caveat here is that you could actually run an A, B, C, D test, actually up to E. You could test out 5 variables at the same time. Facebook does make that provision for that. We, however, have felt testing one variable at a time and moving on to the next has many times shown better results than sort of combining 5 variables at the same time. Then it does shorten the creative process. So we've seen that being a huge benefit and something that you have learned. Instead of deploying your resources, your creative teams to sort of make these 20 assets, we've seen it better telling them, let's work on perhaps just 2 creatives, delivered for us 2 creatives. Let's test that out. And then with the learnings, layer that to the next level and deliver maybe to us 2 more creatives based on what you have learned in phase 1. So what you've seen is that the overall creative process becomes much, much shorter because you're sort of using these, if I could use the word sprints, to ideally find out what works before you move on to the next level, and so on and so forth, as opposed to telling your design team to deliver 30, 40 creatives, which, by the way, may not be the most effective when you come to test in your campaign. The other thing is that we've seen it building confidence in the program teams. This is before they commit a larger budget, a larger amount onto the entire campaign. So say the campaign budget is $5,000, before they pour the entire $5,000 onto their campaign, we sort of have built the confidence because we've tested out. We've seen the creatives that resonate best with the teams, with the audiences. We've seen the message that resonates best. We've seen the audience that is best suited for the campaign. Then, and spending a fraction of that amount. So say for 5,000, we could say, let's use 5%, about $500 to run various tests. And then let's deploy the entire 4,500 onto already proven and winning strategies. So that's something that we've seen happening to various teams. So if you're here and you're working with your teams, this is something that will definitely help and build their confidence as they commit resources to it. And last but not least, you've seen a huge appreciation by partners that you've worked with. One of our key partners has been, that we've worked with previously, has been Meta and Johnson & Johnson. And you've seen them, that going a long way, especially when you're doing the reporting towards the end. It shows your thoroughness as a team. It shows your thought process. It shows that you really do care about your target audience and who it is that you are reaching. So all these are learnings that have really stood out for us. There could be more, and I'm sure a couple of the teams here, PSI teams spread across the globe, could add more onto this, but so these are sort of our 6 that we felt we wanted to share with you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, joined from across the globe, we want to end here, but we're going to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have based on this. I think we have a bit over about 5 minutes or so to get your questions. You could go ahead and unmute yourself if you prefer that, or you could go and share it on the chat space there if you have any question for us, for Penny and I, for this session. Let me go and check the chat there and see. Nothing so far. Let me just scroll and see if there is. So a lot of you are around talking about the variable to test. I can see a lot of them are talking about some of the variables to test. Let me see if there's any question for us. Great. Looks like there's none. We are hoping because because this was clear to everyone. But if a question does come up, we are going to leave our email addresses in there. I'm going to ask Penny to just share on the chat space there. But it's also up on your deck there. So Stephen Minor, s-minor@psi.org, or pthunde@psi.org. And with that, without any further ado, I'm happy to give you back your 3 minutes or so and say on behalf of PSI team, Penny and I, we are thankful for the time that you've been with us. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any question or anything that you need help with, or anything that you need clarified that wasn't clear on this call. But let me just also take this opportunity to give a big shout out to all the country teams joined in. We have Eswatini joined in, we have the Kenya team joined in, we have the Ethiopia team joined in. I see the Nigeria team, the India team as well, our colleagues all over the world, and a few more others. Thank you so much for this, for your time. We do hope that you can now run effective campaigns. You can now run your campaigns effectively and identify what works with your audience, even as you launch your campaign. I'm going to ask Penny to give also our closing remarks, and that is it from us. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Steve, for that, and for everyone for attending and participating. We had a good time. So as Steve said, in case you have any questions or follow-up questions, please email us on the chat and the emails we've shared on the chat. So thank you very much once more.